Buddha said, life is suffering. But he never said, that's a bad thing. I think if you were to ask most people about suffering, they would say, avoid it at all costs. And yet, it is the most inevitable experience in human life. The efforts we go to avoid it are monumental. You all know your routine for avoiding suffering. Maybe you don't. But trust me, you have one. Many people meditate to avoid suffering. Many of you are here because you don't want to have to go through it. My apologies. You know the tricks: alcohol, sex, worldly achievement, money, fame, all the things you can get that will allow you a pass on suffering. And yet I would ask people who have achieved all those things if it's worked. Has it worked? It depends on when you ask. After an orgasm, of course. This is avoiding suffering at the depth. It's connecting with life force and life energy, and it's wonderful. But then tell somebody that was the last one you'll ever have. The last ice cream cone you'll ever taste. Try to imagine having gotten everything that you wanted in life and being told, as you will be, that it's all going to be taken away. That is the doorway that we all walk through. That's why life is suffering. It's the suffering of losing what you've got. It's the suffering of not getting what you wanted. It's built into the system. I read an article that Ram Dass said, which was quite brilliant, but basically, if you try to avoid suffering, it owns you. David Brooks in the New York Times today was talking about suffering. Really interesting. It just came into play in exactly the right time where I am going through lots of suffering. And I'm not alone. I have become aware that the universe and I share a dialogue. I feel very connected to life and life very connected to me. And I really believe it's true for everyone. I believe we are all unbelievably interwoven, and that when you are connected to yourself, everything will reflect you. You have to walk through suffering. Every effort to avoid it strengthens it. You have to walk through loss, grief, fear, pain, the whole litany of options that come into human life. it's a training ground, really. How not to become the victim of suffering, but how to become liberated. I can tell you I have thought at various steps along the way that I had achieved that kind of liberation. Certainly life had presented me with intimations of that very strongly, and I embraced it. And then it went, not yet. Because there are layers of being that we all have that are basically invisible to us. We can design a life for ourselves that really is a kind of complete theatrical performance. We can live a life presenting ourselves to the world, presenting ourselves to ourselves as a particular kind of being. Kind, compassionate, loving, tough, soldierly, warrior-like, whatever your thing is, you create a persona, and you really do buy into it one way or another. It's reinforced by everybody outside you. You really do come to a point where you believe the person you've created. And then, in an awakening, if you will, much of that is dispersed. You no longer see yourself at least as separate from the totality. You see yourself as one with all that is. But that one, even if it's molecular in size, a grain of sand, whatever it is, it's still there. And you can walk around thinking that you are one with the universe, but that one thing that irritant at the center of it is this tiny little bit of ego mind that still identifies itself in some way as whatever, a good person, a loving father, a good student. Well, you know, whatever you, I'm using the word good every time. A lot of us identify with things other than that. But even those corners of your own perception are limitations on the totality that you represent. And what I am journeying through right now, it's funny, people have written to me saying, I hate the word journey. But I see it as that, an adventure, if you will. What I am going through now is a deeper level of exposure to me, to the separate self, and watching it trying to hide from suffering and loss and grief and finding no safe haven. Zero. Zero. No trick of identity works. No narrative presentation works. There's only this being body going through, at this moment in time, something called loss. You've heard me now for the last God knows how long talking about the giving up of the house in Los Angeles. I think you're probably all bored with this story. But it's the ongoing lesson right now. I have a twofold lesson coming. One is letting go of Los Angeles. Then I have to let go of San Rafael, which means all of you guys. It's one punch followed by another punch and then an entry into a complete unknown. The grief that is accompanying the loss of a familiar space of 35 years is akin to being told you have 6 months left to live. Trust me, when you get that diagnosis, your vision will change. You will look at life very differently than you do when you think you've got 40 years left, 50, whatever your mind projects, infinite time. The end of an era, the end of a moment, the end of a experience in a place that you love, assuming you've arrived at a place that you love, is uprooting in the deepest possible way. And you will begin, I have begun, to suffer a loss that I had never fully anticipated. That loss, of course, was written into the contract from day one. But now that I'm letting go of the whole, I'm also having to let go of the pieces. And some of the pieces are stronger than the whole. Objects, books, sculptures, my grandson's toys, old papers, on and on. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you accumulate over 35 years. And how do you disperse with all this? And letting it go doesn't mean you're separated from it. You can carry things you've let go with you for eons of time. The objective is truly let go. The core of this very practice is letting go. The core is surrender. I thought I was good at it until now. And now I'm facing the stuff that I don't want to let go of. I do not want to let go of the walk down the street in Los Angeles that I've walked down for 35 years. It's not a very interesting street particularly. You know, it's often too hot, and it's very predictable, block by block by block, and I walk, miles of it. But once I discovered my camera, starting taking pictures of the sidewalk and the trash cans and all these different things, it became much more of a street than I ever imagined. It became a discovery zone day by day of such unexpected beauty. And I kept thinking, how is it I can walk down this street now for all this time and discover something new every time? And every time I do, it makes me love it more. It makes me love it more. And then I come back into my house, and the walk into the house, I mean, we created a very beautiful space. The walk in, every element of it is unbelievably embracing. And the people who are buying the house spoke about that as they walked through the house. And of course, I'm so grateful they appreciate it, but it also broke my heart. And the breaking of the heart is at the core of suffering. The breaking of who you are. And you don't even know that there's a you to be broken until this thing comes in. And the intelligence, the brilliance of the universe doing this work is shocking. It knows exactly where to go, when to strike, and cut, gone, or not gone. Crack, crack. We are all, every one of us, going to go through this journey. The slow motion version of it is being given a death sentence. You have 6 months to live. You have 3 months to live. You have whatever you're given. It will completely turn your head around, and you will either begin to regret the things not done, feel the loss of the things that you have had, turn your attention forward into the unknown world that faces you, be unable to look away from the thing that has been. Whatever it is, you're going to face what is at the core, the essence of what we do in this class every day, which is look at what is. Look at what is. Every day we are having and losing everything. Every day you step away. You have no assurance ever that there will be one more moment ahead. You have no assurance of anything. All you have is this moment. The core idea of spiritual practice is to let go of the was and the will be and be present here. Because within the confines of this very moment, all of that exists. all of it. And it is, this space is your primary protection, if you will. This is the totality right here. Finding the entry point into the opening that connects you to something so much bigger than you, so much vaster, so much more multidimensional than the world you see, has a doorway inside, and that it is ultimately the only doorway left. You can escape into the outer realms as much as you want while that doorway is seemingly closed or not available to you. You can escape into the pleasures of life, the beauty of life, the fear of life, the drama of life, whatever you want to escape into. You can enjoy and take it all in, and it's meant for that. It is meant for that. Take it all in. But be aware, suffering awaits you, and it is not a bad thing. It is a necessary thing. Going through it will evaporate, wipe away, cleanse the clinging part of you that separates you from life. Going through suffering frees you. Skirting suffering locks you into it. It is not easy. It is not easy to go through the thing you most fear. At some moment, they don't give you a choice unless they give you oxycodone and God knows what else and all these other drugs to deaden it. But if you're alive and walking through life and you are feeling and experiencing the depth of loss and grief that is inevitable, and there is nowhere to go to escape it, walk through the door. Keep walking, because the part of you that is afraid, the part of you that doesn't want to be there, the reactive element that is fighting all of this stuff is being washed away. It is being demolished. You are being freed by your pain and suffering. I say that a little bit in the abstract because there are people for whom that is not taking place. There are people who can manage to suffer in the midst of suffering and release nothing. That's possible. It's totally understandable and human, and one should embrace people in that space. It's amazing what can happen if you go to someone who's suffering. It's amazing what you can do. I will tell you, it's so simple. It's just hold their hand, touch their shoulder, wait for the permission, if you will, to do that. You'll feel it in their body. If you just put your hand on their shoulder, they'll go. That's the doorway in. That's how you give help to another, how you give help to yourself. You can do this. You can do this. You can do this. You can do this. You can reach for help. And the help that comes is not ego-minded disintegration. It is the thing that underlies ego and mind. It is called the self, yourself. Suffering is the pathway to the vastness of your infinite being. If you are willing to have the courage to take those steps, knowing how hard it is, knowing you're going to be angry, knowing you will lash out, knowing that you're going to look for every little corner of refuge and not find it. If you can believe that and know that you can keep going and that you have the strength and in fact no alternative really, if you can do that, you will find yourself in a place that is free of reaction to life. It is called oneness with life. There is no one reacting. There is only it happening. And it is not happening to you, it's just happening. The you part lets go, and the happening takes over. And you just go, ah. We're all on that journey, every one of us. Every one of us. There's no one in the world who's been born and who's alive who's not on that journey. The implication is that from Tibetan teaching or Buddhist teaching, most people fail at every lifetime and come back to figure it out again and again, because time and space are not all that important, and bodily embodiment and creating a self seems to be the nature of the mechanism. But to be finally free of the mechanism is to go okay to it, rather than to hide in the various corners of egoistic achievement or financial greatness or whatever it is you think you've gotten. You know, all of those places which we can devote a whole lifetime to trying to hide in, all of them ultimately are unraveled. And you go naked into this oneness, but truly that nakedness still has to be dissolved. That sense of you and it has to be dissolved. There is no real you and it. There is only that which is. And as long as there is a reactive principle, like I'm a good person, but I had a good life, but I'm a nice guy, whatever your thing is, I'm sorry to keep moving in that direction, because I'm sure there's a lot of other, I was a wealthy man, I had it all. Whatever your thing is, woman, I don't mean to make this sexist, whatever it is that comes out has to be worked out. So I'm trying to talk to you about this, not intellectually and not theoretically. It's what I'm doing every day. And it's going to be a long process, I'm told astrologically. A year and a half or more of lots of scrubbing. And it is so hard. And I've had years and years and years of practice and training, and I thought, you'll be great at this. Well, I don't know that I'm great at it, but I'm aware of it. I'm aware of what's happening, and I'm sharing it with you, as I say, I think weekly, to give you a hint of what's coming and what we're all going to have to do. Every one of us. The practice gives you perspective, it gives you muscle, it gives you a certain kind of training, so when it all happens, it's not like, why me, God, or what is this, or what's going on, I don't understand anything. You will understand it. You will get, this is how it works. Suffering is not evil, and it's not bad in and of itself. It's process. It's wiping away the you that can't bear it, so that the you that transcends it can reveal its full self. I have intimations of that, and I have moments where it is wordless, beauty, simple, kind, loving. And those moments are like indicators of what is and can be and will be, I think. Like I said, I think on these talks, if I don't arrive at a place that will really reflect what I'm referring to, then you can toss all of these talks into the garbage and just forget anything I've said and figure it out on your own terms. But if they provide any help at all along the way, and if I can speak to you down the road saying, and I kind of can do it now, even though I feel the journey goes on, I can tell you there is something. I sat on this couch yesterday with my grandson, whose favorite thing in the world is to have sword fights. And so we went through this long sword fight, which luckily knocked both of us out at the same time. So we got to sit on the couch and just breathe heavily. And he wanted to watch a video on my phone of other people sword fighting, because that's his obsession. And we sat there, and while we were watching it, he put his head on my shoulder, like that. And I said, "You don't get many of these." And I drank it in. I just drank it in, and I just knew this will pass. Part of my grief at some point in life will be, I had that experience and it's gone. But what I got while it was happening was, it is happening now, and it is worth everything. I am moving across country so that I can have more of those moments where the two of us can pass out in exhaustion from fighting and just sit together, and his head goes on my shoulder, or I put my arm around him, or my granddaughter and I just share a moment that is like pure light and bliss. That's what we go for. That's what life offers us, those moments, and they're worth it because they touch the core of oneness. That's what's so beautiful. They are the door light, the light that shines into what really is. The fact that it's momentary in human life does not mean that it's momentary beyond human life. It is, I believe, an infinite expression of head on shoulder. I can tell when I work with you guys that I love you in the way my grandmother loved me on her deathbed. I can't explain how or why I feel that, except that I think she transmitted it into me. My mother was a carrier of love as well, so I got the gift of it. Rudy, he, what's the word, militarized love. He turned it into something really potent, and I have learned that. And I find subtle and I find dramatic ways to love you and will love you. But I am finding now also a need to be loved, and I'm open to any love that comes in. I'm finding a weakness, I'm finding a susceptibility to being meaningless and nothing, and finding as much as it is beautiful, it's also hard on some level, and so I look to everything that comes at me as kind of a blessing. The suffering eradicates and the love infuses my life. So we need to do that for each other. We need to do that as best we can. Or if we don't get that, if we don't get it from anywhere else, I'm telling you, the doorway that I have been shown into my own inner being through my heart, through my gut, through my ego-minded throat chakra, through my third eye, through my open chakra at the top of my head, through my sex organs, through the base of my spine. All of these chakras, as they have opened, are basically doorways for love and release. And every one of you who opens those through your own practice will discover life coming at you in torrents that you will not believe and that you may not be ready for, but just let it happen. Life is the teacher. Life will release you. Life will bring suffering, and suffering will get rid of everything about you that isn't necessary, which is everything. So, put this in the drawer, listen to it in 20 years or 10 years or whenever you need it. It will do nothing but affirm the fact that what you're going through is not a waste of time and not a punishment and not a bad thing and not evil and not part of the awfulness of life. If anything, suffering is at the core of and may be at the center of the beauty of life. I know that's a hard lesson to buy, and I know it in my own guts right now because I have to go over and over and teach you because I have to learn it. But that's how it's done. We learn it We do it, and we arrive at a place of no words left, just being. Any questions?
But is that really true? I know that I can get stuck when I'm suffering, let's say, especially with material things. I start focusing on the material things, and when I have bodily pain, I focus on that, and it's easy to believe that's true, but isn't it true also that maybe you can go through it? I know I love to skirt stuff, but maybe you can go through it like Jesus said, I died because so you wouldn't have to suffer. Maybe there is a way direct to being without having to go, without having to focus or maybe get stuck in the suffering.
I don't know that Jesus said, I died so you don't have to go through the suffering. If that's the case,
Or
I
you
don't
don't have to die.
I think it was different than that. Forgive me, I'm not a Christian, so I don't know the teaching completely, but he died for us is a given, I think. And he went through great pain and suffering and was abandoned in the middle of his suffering by the very forces we're talking about. He was completely abandoned. And then two things come out of that teaching. One, somewhere he transitioned into forgive them, for they know not what they do. So he went from me to them, from I to other, which is a huge journey for a soul to make. And he was reborn. He passed through all this, and he came back in some way, a new soul, deathless soul. That's really powerful narrative. And one leans into that narrative for a lot of reasons, but I think one of them, if you want to know where Jesus' story becomes really important, it's on your deathbed, when you're really suffering. The image of a man hanging on a cross is as much suffering as a human can bear. Whatever you're going through is probably in those moments maybe equaling that. Having his image in your head as a resurrected being, and having his image in your head as someone who can forgive that which is causing the suffering. That is the story of Jesus for me. You know, a good Jewish kid, and Jesus was a good Jewish kid once. That's the story I get. That's how I live it. Jesus speaks to me a lot, and I really have great love for his journey and why it's so important to the human race. I really get it. So I don't think he was able to get above suffering exactly. I mean, he got to a point where it transformed into something else, but there was a period in the middle of it where there was no relief and no release. And I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be there, but there is a promise of something beyond. A promise, which I do think comes, if nothing else, in death itself. You know, who knows what's on the other side? I mean, those of us who've, you know, done a lot of LSD in the past, or who have, I don't know, had certain kind of psychic experiences, have intimations of what lies on the other side. And I will tell you, much of what you are and who you are travels with you in that journey. But if you get to the point of really deep surrender, you hit the clear light of reality, and you just go. It's hard to get there, but doable. So maybe I need to say, just to clarify, I am one person talking. I am not universal intelligence, although I feel informed by something greater. And maybe I'm completely wrong in everything I'm saying. I throw that out as a possibility. So I don't walk around like a pontificator who knows anything. But I think what I am saying is being fed by something I know nothing about, and yet I have been given an opportunity to voice. If I am wrong, my deepest and profoundest apologies. If I am right, I hope it helps. That's all I know how to say. I have no clue. I am not the son of God in the universe. I am a voice somehow being fed something that I am able to articulate in a way that feels real to me. And if it feels real to you, enjoy it and use it. If it doesn't feel real, go to those places where it does, because that's what we have to find in life, that which speaks to us. This speaks to me and through me. Let that be whatever it is. Anybody else?
The part of me that thinks I know everything is hearing this and saying, well, because death isn't in my face, that everything that you're saying relates to my life. I mean, as it is, as a fairly young person, at least that's how that's my narrative, that I'm still fairly young, that, especially now since your talks, I've really had some suffering that comes up. You know, I get slapped around, and then on the other side of the suffering, always what happens with me is I discover something on the other side of the suffering. And what I like about your teaching is it's kind of realistic in that, you know, I may get enlightened, but I also may not get enlightened. And it's kind of, you know, I'm going to get whacked around, you know. And at the same time, this is a continual, what I'm getting out of this is the way I interpret what you're saying is it's kind of like you cook dinner and then you scrub the pot and then the pot shines. And then you cook dinner and you scrub the pot and the pot shines, and it's like,
So, there you are, you're enlightened. That's the lesson, that's it. You know? I mean, first of all, we all get enlightened in the end. One way or another, it happens. So, and whatever that may mean to you, but it really does mean, you know, it's chop wood, carry water. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Scrub the pot. You don't benefit other than the fact that scrubbing the pot can be, oh God almighty, I don't want to be scrubbing this pot. And the other thing is, I'm scrubbing the pot. It's a very different world, very different. And you have to arrive at that. And some days you may have arrived at it, and then a week later you suddenly lost it. And you go, oh, I remember the other way. And then you go back. It just goes on and on and on. If you're judging yourself at all, there's something to be removed from the equation. That judgment is what? It's your own mind, it's your own reactivity that is remaining in the picture and it represents the problem. When that goes away, the scrubbing the pot becomes second nature, easy, and very, very sustaining. Like, wow. And if you don't like scrubbing the pot after a while, every night at the same time, you leave it in the sink, I guess, and in the morning you go scrub the pot, and you do it that way, and you go, well, I still scrub the pot. You have choice in how you do this thing. But the choice has certain limitations. Not to scrub the pot will end up causing some real problems down the road. All sorts of vermin and things that will come in, and your job is do what you're given, moment to moment, day by day, and live the life you have. Lots of it will be odious and not pleasant, but if you don't project that out too far, and you don't look at it as though it's something that you wish was different, it just is. And then you have the aso moment, the aso with life. And it's really beautiful.
well, the other thing I want to thank you for seriously is you talked about vulnerability a lot. So the vulnerability aspect to me applies to the suffering. It's like, okay, you're suffering. Now let's, as you're saying, let's not run away from this. Let's be in this. This hurts. Let's feel this. And hopefully that I can apply the same intention to when I have an ecstatic experience. Let's really feel this and really go into it and feel love, be with it instead of running away from that as well, So,
Or trying to cling to it, because it's going to pass. So it's being alive in the moment, period, whatever is, and not trying to design a life through which you can escape the things you don't like and only go to the things you do like, because in the end, that won't work. You only can do that for a period of time, and then larger forces come into the picture. So we have to learn to bow down. I'm telling you, once it takes you out of the picture, there's only the picture. It's not happening to you, it's happening. That's all there is. It's happening, period. And that which is happening is what you are, in ways that nobody will be around to grasp and understand. You're just it. But you had to go through a period of witnessing it in order to finally become one with it. So there's a separation that's required in order for a return to the whole. And that's what it creates. And I can't tell you why it does that, other than it seems, once you're in the totality, I'll just say it seems worth it. Okay, is this going on too long? Yes?
I'm just going to share this. I think it was in the 80s. I took a class in San Francisco. I don't really remember the name of the class, but it was myself and one other student and a teacher. And she was telling us how you can really, that the joy of God, or whatever you want to call it, is so available. And, I'm just sitting there listening, and we're chatting, and then all of a sudden, this force of joy came into me. It was so intense because I was trying to resist it, because I was going to lose control with joy. So it is there, it is available, and that's not suffering. It's suffering when you resist it, which is what I did. But it was so strong and so powerful. There was I was like, oh my God, I feel it,
I don't want to make the idea of suffering the be-all and end-all of human experience, although it has something to do with the end-all.
Right.
But joy is definitely in the picture, and maybe the triumphant experience when all is said and done. I believe, personally, that that's true. One of these coming weekends, I'm going to teach this class at Susan's house in Petaluma. Some of you have been there before, some of you haven't. I just want you to be aware, because classes are shifting now, because Blanche and I are going to New York to buy the New York house, and then dealing with the selling of the LA house, and then ultimately this. I don't know which weekend, but we will be coming to your house in the near future. I want to seed the teaching into other spaces. Definitely Shelley's house and Mark's house is a wonderful space to have this class. Your house would be a wonderful space. There may be other places, but in order for this to continue, if it will, people will have to pick up the mantle and teach. And I can try to come in so many times a year and offer to teach as well, but we'll see how that plays out. But I love the fact that these spaces exist, and if you want to support that, I would encourage it dramatically, and I'm hoping many more people will arrive and learn to do this. And if not, I will continue to probably give talks and teach elsewhere, and you're always welcome wherever that may be. Okay, thank you for coming.
There will be no, let me put it differently. We will not be here next weekend. Hopefully there'll be a class.
Yeah, we'll send out a note. We should figure out.
Who's teaching.
I think I'm in line.
Are you in line? Okay, so next week there will
What's
be
the date next week?
the 15th, 14th, something like that.
I may have to shift with somebody, but we'll figure it out.
Okay, anyway, there will be a class next week, and those of you who wish to come, please do so. Okay? As I keep trying to tell people, the value of working with other teachers is that you have to find a way to expand your own mechanism to deal with other. It's not always just Bruce or the familiar. The unfamiliar is very valuable You learn more about yourself and being with others than just being with the same one over and over. And everybody who sits in this space has something to offer. So feel open to it, attending. Thank you, long talk. I apologize for the length, but I'll be back in 2 weeks, and I look forward to seeing everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.